Good morning. Welcome here to Westwood Community Church for the Sunday service. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently to start off. We realize Sunday morning is important for a lot of people, but we do lots of calls and visits and things during the week. So I've decided to start highlighting what we're doing with some of the children's stuff. On Tuesdays, we're doing a family night. So Graham asked a few of the kids what they want to do for Christmas and some other questions. So in a moment, we're going to play a video for that. First of all, let's open the service in prayer. God, I'm grateful for your presence here today, whether in this building or out in so many homes. I pray that you continue to bring us hope, that you help us see you in this season, that we have the ability to care for other people, Lord, and show how we are as Christians by the love we show for people. We give you this time, Lord. Amen. I like the donkey, because he is just hanging out and chilled. He gets to eat the grass. He gets to see Jesus the whole time.
I like also the donkey. He's funny. Wait, no, mine's the donkey.
I shouldn't start next time.
My best Christmas present is this Google.
This may be hard to believe, but having my sister. Stop. Because she was born on Christmas. Yeah.
Go to my grandma and grandpa's for Christmas. Eat dinner, what's like mashed potatoes and like good stuff. And then I go pet kitties.
Have like a big brunches with like family on Christmas. What else? Basically just get presents, spend time with family, and eat.
I like going to dinner. Then I like going to my aunts and uncles to have a big lunch. Then I like going to my other grandma and grandpa's, have a big dinner and lunch. Yeah. And we play things like Johnny Can't Cross the River. And,
No Bears Out.
No Bears Out tonight.
We like to celebrate my birthday.
I have 2 things. Well, no, 3. I'll do 4.
I guess I'll just want money because my aunt said she'd give me some.
I want COVID to end and a skateboard. A phone.
No.
A stroller for a doll. My grandma and grandpa.
Seeing my cousins, and like Christmas parties and Christmas dinners.
The youth, like when we have supper and then we did the present and then we
I
play
miss our
games.
Christmas party too. That was a lot of fun.
Luke 1:46-55. Mary responded, "Oh, how my soul rejoices the Lord, how my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he took notice of his lowly servant girl, and from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One is holy, and he has done great things for me. He shows mercy from generation to generation to all who fear him. His mighty arm has done tremendous things. He has scattered the proud and haughty ones. He has brought down princes from their thrones and exalted the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away with empty hands. He has helped his servant Israel and remembered to be merciful, for he has made this promise to our ancestors, to Abraham and his children forever." Today we light Mary's candle that reminds us of joy. Mary was visited by an angel and given good news. Jesus, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and the only true high priest would come to us through her. The privilege of welcoming God to earth was not given to kings or priests, but to Mary in a miraculous act. "The Holy Spirit will come on you," Gabriel said to Mary. "No person is ever too lowly, poor, or insignificant to be graced by Jesus, to be loved by Jesus, and to be filled with the Holy Spirit. This is the good news. This is joy." We will respond by reading together. Please join me in parts marked all. Jesus, you come to comfort the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives. To all who mourn, you give a crown of beauty instead of ashes, festive praise instead of despair. Instead of shame and dishonor, you give us a double portion of honor, a joyous blessing instead of mourning. Though the mountains shake, yet your unfailing love for us will not be moved.
Please join me as we pray today. God, I'm grateful that Christmas is coming again quickly, that we have a chance to celebrate family, even though it may be different. We get to celebrate your birth. We get to remember what you've done for us, and I'm grateful for that. I'm thankful for the leadership here, whether it's tech people, council, commission leaders, pastors, all through this congregation, Lord. There's people that are constantly doing more to bring community, to bring hope, to bring life to Westwood. Lord, for the people that continue to tune in, Lord, to figure out how to do technology. I know that's a challenge for some of the people at home. I am grateful that we have this opportunity and they're willing to embrace it. God, continue to give us the wisdom as we move into our services, as we move into this Christmas season, to be safe, to be wise, and to be honoring of you. God, we know this isn't always a time when we're happy, but happiness is fleeting. It's a little bit fickle. But there is joy, and there's lots of joy in our moments if we look a little bit deeper. You promise us joy in chaos. You promise us joy in everything. That's not always happiness. So we thank you for that joy that we can have today. As we receive offering again through technology, through online, through people dropping them off, Lord, I'm grateful that people continue to give and give very generously. I pray that we use it wisely. That as we continue to do things for your kingdom, as we continue to do things at Westwood in our area and much broader, that you give us wisdom. Pray all this in your name. Amen.
I'll be reading from Luke 1:37 to 56. A few days later, Mary hurried to the hill country of Judea to the town where Zechariah lived. She entered the house and greeted Elizabeth. At the sound of Mary's greeting, Elizabeth's child leaped within her, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Elizabeth gave a glad cry and exclaimed to Mary, "God has blessed you above all women, and your child is blessed. Why am I so honored that the mother of my Lord should visit me? When I heard your greeting, the baby in my womb jumped for joy. You are blessed because you believed that the Lord would do what he said." And Mary responded, "Oh, how my soul praises the Lord, for my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he took notice of a lowly servant girl, and from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One is holy, and he has done great things for me. He shows mercy from generation to all who fear him. His mighty arm has done tremendous things. He has scattered the proud and the haughty ones. He has brought down princes from their thrones and exalted the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away with empty hands. He has helped his servant Israel and remembered to be merciful. For he made this promise to our ancestors, to Abraham and his children forever." Mary stayed with Elizabeth about 3 months and then went back to her home.
As we all know, especially those who are parents, tone of voice and posture makes a huge difference in how our attitude comes across. One can say almost exactly the same words, but context and tone of voice can give such a different message. A few examples I've heard over the last few weeks. Fine. Fine. Whatever. Whatever. I'll get to it. I'll get to it already. How about these two sentences? They sound so familiar, but yet they're so different. How can I be sure of this? How will this be? Tone and posture make a huge difference between loved ones and how we come before God. Last week we learned about how a senior man, a man of great respect in his community, came to God with not the correct tone and posture. Zechariah had dealt with many disappointments in his life. And when he received great news that the prayers that he'd been praying his entire married life, that they would have a child, were about to be answered in the most amazing way. But when he received that great news, what did he do? Instead, he let his disbelief and self-pity come through instead of wonder and gratitude. And God disciplined him. Not punished, disciplined him so that he would learn. And that discipline was a blessing. He sat with his wife for 5 months of silence. Well, he ended up having 9 months, but 5 months where his wife went into seclusion. And at the end of it, he gave a beautiful song that I ended the service with last week. The perfect way to end his 9 months of silence. This week, we are to be introduced to a young woman who is given great news. But this news carries major social ramifications for herself. And we see similar words that come from her mouth, but a very different attitude and posture. And we'll conclude this message with her song of joy, the song that we just heard read just a few minutes before I got into this message. But today, I want to read to you from most of Luke chapter 1, verses 26 to 55, and dig into a story that we all think we already know so well because we hear it every Christmas. I want to dig into it and show there is so much depth, there's so much more going on here than what meets the eye. So, verse 26. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy. Now, who is Elizabeth again? This was John the Baptist's mother, and Elizabeth was Mary's mother's cousin. So now, those who come from large extended families, you understand what this means. This is a cousin aunt. And she was now 6 months pregnant. She'd gone through her 5 months of seclusion. And she was announcing to everyone, look what the Lord has done. And I'm sure this story had spread all around. Everybody heard of this incredible story. Going on, God sent the angel Gabriel. As mentioned last week, Gabriel is mentioned only once in the Old Testament. It was in the book of Daniel, and it was with a warning of this great villain that was coming, Antiochus Epiphanes, and being prepared to stand firm in their faith. Gabriel is only mentioned twice in the New Testament. Last week, he was mentioned for the first time of announcing the coming of the prophet that will come before the Messiah. This week, we see Gabriel again. He's announcing the birth of the Messiah. We might see Gabriel a third time, but he's unnamed the angel in the book of Revelation. Many scholars think he's the same person, but we don't really know. Gabriel, he's left with a large air of mystery. We don't know anything more about him from Scripture. And I don't think we need to dig into any more of that. Why? Because it can easily become a distraction. Many mystics over the years have dug into what they think Gabriel has said and done and come into the church. And I think that is not what God would want us to do. Instead, we need to get back to understanding what was happening at this time so we have the context, the underlying deeper meaning of this story. Because it's not such a simple story that we take for granted as Christmas. It's a much deeper, a much more in-depth story. So back to the passage. To Nazareth, a village in Galilee. Nazareth was a small village in the backwoods province of Galilee. It was at most a few hundred inhabitants, and it was predominantly just an agricultural village. in our Manitoba context. It would sort of be like Elkhorn, Manitoba. Where is Elkhorn? It's the last town before the Saskatchewan border. The ends of the earth. It has a gas station, a dirty bathroom, and they grow wheat. What would somebody from Jerusalem think about Nazareth? About the same as somebody from Winnipeg would think about Elkhorn. To a virgin named Mary. Who is this Mary? Well, Mary is actually the most common woman's name in the New Testament times. It was a variant of Miriam from the Old Testament. There are no less than 6 women in the New Testament who are named Mary. What do we know about this Mary? Well, not a lot. Luke has by far the most information about Mary, much more than any of the other Gospels. Many theologians believe that Luke actually sat down with Mary and wrote down her own personal accounts of what happened. When you read this story, you can hear Mary's own voice. And a story that I trust. When you have something that happens in your life that has this much significance, you can't help but have it ingrained in your brain. It's burnt deep in. I've asked this story to others before. Your memories. We have a strange thing. I don't remember what I ate for supper 3 nights ago. Or if I do, I have to stop and think about it really hard. Ask a woman who's in her 80s, do you remember the details of the birth of your firstborn? And she'll tell you everything in minute detail. That's how our memories are. I trust Mary's memories that she gave to Luke. Again, though, like the angel Gabriel, there's this temptation to dig into and find more about Mary than the scripture gives us. In 2016, the feature article in National Geographic for December was about Mary. But it wasn't really about Mary. It's about what people think they know about Mary through mystical visions and dreams. The article said that there were over 2,000 official sightings of Mary in the past 2,000 years. A sighting of Mary each year. But were those Mary? Well, I don't think so. I think this is people's very active imagination of trying to understand what they see around them. I think it's a distraction from what this story, this powerful, amazing story has to say. So what does the Bible say about Mary? It says that she was a virgin who was betrothed or engaged to be married to a man named Joseph. If we're going to go by standards of that time, a young woman who is engaged, who is still a virgin, would have been the ages between 14 and 16 years old. We know from the book of Matthew, in Matthew chapter 13, verse 55, that Mary and Joseph, after they got married, had 4 more boys and at least 2 girls, which means that there was a family of 7. It mentions the names of the brothers of Jesus. They were James, Joseph, Simeon, and Judas. We know that Jude, who is known as Judas, and James wrote books in the Bible. We'll be studying Jude's very short book in February. Matthew 13:55 also says he has sisters. It doesn't mention their names, but sisters means plural. So this was actually a fairly large family for even at this time in history. It would have been seen as a blessed family, a family with 7 children. During Jesus' earthly ministry, Mary had not been a follower of Jesus. It mentions that Mary and her children were, sort of embarrassed by the things that Jesus was saying during his earthly ministry. But Mary was with Jesus when he was crucified. And according to Paul, Jesus appeared to her and Jesus' other siblings, and they all became believers. Mary and the other children were present on the day of Pentecost when the church started. James, the next oldest, known as James the Wise, James the Just, along with Peter, became the 2 chief leaders of the church in Jerusalem. Acts chapter 2 is the last time we see Mary in the Bible. But we do have other writings that we could say are accurate and authentic. Early church fathers, these are the disciples of the disciples, write that Mary ended up in the city of Ephesus, where the disciple John, the author of the book of John and Revelation, and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, ended up as well. Jesus told John to take care of his mother in her old age. And that's exactly what John did. John was Mary's nephew. Jesus and John were cousins. And they were close. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. Again, we know very little about Joseph. I'll talk more about him next week because he's our main character. But here's a few things that we know. He was a carpenter, which is not a low-class job, but it's not high either. It's not the type of thing that you'd think the direct line for the king of David would be part of. You wouldn't think that he'd be a carpenter. A carpenter would have been a hard-working, middle-class man. But then again, nobody had been on the throne from David's line in over 586 years. Stop and think about that for a minute. That is an incredibly long time. Do you even know what was going on in history 586 years ago? Who was in power? Who was the King of England? Who was the Holy Roman Emperor? What wars were being fought? Most of us had no idea what happened then. During this 586 years, empires had risen and fallen, again, just like Daniel had predicted. And 140 years before this story took place, the Jews had managed to regain their independence from this dreaded man, Antiochus Epiphanes. And guess who became the new king of Israel? If you guessed that it was one of David's descendants, you would be wrong. David's descendants had nothing to do with that 103 years of this new dynasty. This new dynasty were called the Hasmoneans. They were around for 103 years before infighting ended their kingdom. And again, last week we talked about that a bit. A young upstart general married the last Hasmonean princess after he had killed the last reigning male heir in that line. And then eventually, after infighting within his own family, he killed that princess and the 2 children that he had with her, thus forever ending the Hasmonean line of kings forever. Who was that young general turned self-proclaimed king? We know him as Herod. Now with the Hasmonean line dead, wiped off essentially by Herod, he started to become paranoid that somebody would want to claim the throne from him from the line of David. And who's the direct line of David? Who's the descendant that might take his throne that he's so worried about? Joseph, a simple carpenter living in a small backwoods town in a backwoods province. Now, the Jews from this time would have known all of these things when they read this, and they would have been amazed and intrigued. But there's one more group that we're not taken into account who's reading this. Nero's royal court. Who was Luke writing to? Well, the person's name Theophilus meant God-fearer. Luke was writing to somebody in the royal household. They were asking questions. Who's this Paul guy that's waiting for trial before the emperor? And they asked, tell us about this. So Luke wrote this story completely in mind with the interest and intrigue that they would have had. What would have been their interest and intrigue? Actually, it was well known in the Roman Empire at this time. Nero, he was the last descendant of the line of Augustus. They would have known all about Herod's family. Those families interacted. Did you know that the 2 sons of Herod from the princess actually resided in Rome for a time before they went back to try to take the kingdom for themselves and set themselves up as king instead of their father? This intrigue, there was actually a saying that went on at this time that you're better off being one of the emperor's pigs than one of Herod's sons. They would have known this as well, and they would have been incredibly intrigued. Verse 28. Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." Confused and disturbed, Mary tried to think of what the angel could mean. I just love that. That's the first step in this correct posture. What a great response. Confused. What's going on? Disturbed. I don't understand. Her tone and demeanor. Greetings, favored woman. The Lord is with you. What does it mean to be favored by God? Does it mean that Mary was more special than any other woman in the world at that time? Well, some would say yes. Some would say that Mary was sinless and born of a virgin birth. But again, we don't find any of that in the Bible. That's just what mystics say. So, what was special about Mary? Well, she was special because she was obedient. She's obedient to God's ways. She strived to follow his rules. And more importantly, she wanted to have a relationship with her Creator. So, what does it mean to be chosen by God? Being chosen by God does not mean you have your life all perfect and in order. It simply means that God knows that you want to work with him. Why would God want to work with us? Because God always brings his people into doing the great things of transforming the world. So why did God choose Abraham? Well, it wasn't because he was perfect. What was Abraham? He was an idol worshiper from the ancient city of Ur. God chose Abraham because he chooses who he chooses. And it's often those who he doesn't expect. Did God choose David because he was the biggest, strongest, and the firstborn in his family? No, God chose him because he saw what was in his heart. This is exactly why he chose Mary. This is the same reason why God chooses you. Verse 30. Don't be afraid, Mary, the angel told her, for you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be very great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end. Think about what you just learned about the political structure of that day. Herod had a stranglehold on the kingdom. He called in the Roman army to help him rule. But God was saying that Mary would give birth to a child who would one day rule on David's throne in a kingdom that would never end. And who was she about to marry? Joseph, the direct heir in the line of David. Wow. But there's one big problem. Mary asked the angel, but how can this happen? I'm a virgin. That is a big problem. Mary is a virgin. But 722 years earlier, the prophet Isaiah, who we preached on 2 weeks ago, predicted that the Messiah, born in the line of David, would be born to a virgin. Here's how this prediction played out. Mary strived to live a pure life. That shows us part of her character. Why God chose her. He could see in her heart. She was staying pure. She was not sleeping around. She was engaged to a man that she chose to remain pure. She knew she was going to marry Joseph, an heir to the throne of David, and she stayed sexually pure, just as God intended us to do before we get married. Now, here's one of the problems that we have in our society today. We somehow think that people from long ago, or not even that long ago, don't have the temptations that we have today. What we face today are much greater than the temptations that were faced in the past. Now stop and think about that for a minute. That's not much different than us thinking that we're so much smarter today than the people of the past. It's actually the exact same coin, just the other side. I'm here to tell you, people 2,000 years ago, people 4,000 years ago, are still the same, and they still faced the same temptations that we face today. Yes, maybe some of the details are different, but we have still all the same temptations. And Mary dealt with those temptations in the way that God wants us to. She stayed pure. I want to talk a little bit about legends of incarnation, though. I actually just saw a really interesting post on Facebook by a friend of mine debunking one of the things that comes up every Christmas. Incarnation. Well, remember that guy, that madman, Antiochus Epiphanes? He was just one of many, but here's how it went for him. He claimed that he was the son of Zeus. But there's a massive difference in his story than what we're reading about with Mary. Antiochus Epiphanes' mother was, first of all, not a virgin. How do we know this? Well, she had an older son. So Antiochus Epiphanes was really Antiochus IV. His father's name was Antiochus III. He had an older brother. His older brother was the heir to the throne. But Antiochus III's son, the firstborn, looked a lot like and acted a lot like the dad. But the one we know as Antiochus Epiphanes, he didn't look like his father. And they had a rocky relationship. And his mother said, "Your real dad's name is Zeus." Do you see where I'm going here? This is actually something that happened fairly often in ancient times to explain, that child that looks different and doesn't fit in is out of place. So what happened? When Antiochus III died of old age, and the crown prince now became the king, who overthrew him? Antiochus Epiphanes, with the help of his mother. Why? Because he said he deserves to reign because he's really the son of a god. How ridiculous. How ridiculous that some will actually say, this is just the story that Jesus has of being born of a virgin are really just the same two things. They're not. They're radically different stories. One is an excuse for, I would call, frankly, messed up relationships. The other is God, in his incredible knowledge, foretelling over 700 years in advance, knowing exactly how the Messiah needed to be born so that our sins could be forgiven. Again, this story is so much bigger and more complex. Last of all, I just love how this story, when we're reading it, it's coming from the words that were written down by Luke from Mary herself. This simple story just gets more and more complicated now, doesn't it? Verse 35, the angel replied, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. The baby will be born, will be holy, and will be called the Son of God. What's more, your relative Elizabeth has become pregnant in her old age. People used to say that she was barren, but she has now conceived a son, is now in her 6th month. For nothing is impossible with God." Wow, I love that verse. That is a life verse to write down in your home. For nothing is impossible with God. Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant. Here's the evidence of what I say is true. If God can make an old barren woman pregnant, God can give a baby to this virgin woman, you. And even though there's not been a king on David's throne for over 586 years, God can certainly do that as well. For nothing is impossible with God. And here's Mary's response with open hands. "I am the Lord's servant. May everything you have said to me come true." And the angel left her. Mary accepts what the angel has said to be true. I'm sure the consequences of this event were running through her mind. What will Joseph say? What will my parents say? What will my community say? I'm sure those all ran through her mind. But she trusted in God. And then she goes and does this. A few days later, Mary hurried to the hill country of Judea. Now, to put that in perspective, it sounds like that's just over the hill. The hill country in Judea, where she lives up at the very northern part of what is part of Israel. She's coming a 3-day walk, hurried, to where Zechariah lived. She goes to see what the angel had just said about Elizabeth. She entered the house and greeted Elizabeth. At the sound of Mary's greetings, Elizabeth's child leapt within her, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Elizabeth gave a glad cry and exclaimed to Mary, "God has blessed you above all women. Your child is blessed. Why am I so honored that the mother of my Lord should visit me? When I heard your greeting, the baby in my womb jumped for joy. You are blessed because you believed that the Lord would do and what he said. Wow. What an incredible story. I hope it shed new light for you today. I hope this more complicated story than you expected brings new life to you at this Christmas. So what can we do with this story? Well, there's a number of things, but I want to leave you with two things. First of all, Mary is the exact right example of having the right posture. She asks questions. How can this be? But she asks them with an open hand. An openness of not disbelief, but how is this going to work? And when it's explained to her, what does she say? I am the Lord's servant. Do as you will. That is how we're called to act. Zechariah, the old priest of good reputation, was also a man probably filled with self-pity. We can often let things like self-pity get in our way of being used by God. Woe is me. Yeah, we all have gone through hard times. And right now, we're going particularly through some very hard times with COVID. But when you're given good news, it also shows a testimony of how you trust God. Mary's example of trusting God, I am your Lord's servant, is how we're called to respond to God. Mary also leaves herself open to be used by God in a very specific way. She had no intention, maybe I will be the mother of the Messiah. But her very act of remaining holy enabled that prophecy that Isaiah had made over 700 years earlier be able to come true. When we strive to follow God's ways, He ends up using us in more spectacular ways than we expect. Now, I want to make it clear. If you've fallen, if you've turned the other way at times, and you've come back to God, God celebrates in heaven. These are not salvation issues. Having stumbled and repenting and coming back to Christ is what He asks us to do. And striving to be obedient in this time is also what He asks us to do, so that we can be used by Him. But Mary, by being obedient, leaves the door open to be used in a significant and powerful way. Let that be also an example to us. And last of all, God always chooses who He chooses because He wants to turn the world upside down. He chooses the weak to humble the strong. He chooses the common, everyday person to bring about His kingdom. So when you hear the voice of God saying, I choose you, I send you, respond like Mary, I am your Lord's servant. And may this Christmas story come alive to you this Christmas season. I want to conclude with a story, with a song that Mary sang after she saw Elizabeth. We know it as Mary's Magnificat, her song of praise. Verse 46. Oh, how my soul praises the Lord, how my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For He took notice of this lowly servant girl, and from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One is holy, and He has done great things for me. He shows mercy from generation to generation to all who fear Him. His mighty arm has done tremendous things. He has scattered the proud, the haughty ones. He has brought down princes from their thrones and exalted the humble. She has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty-handed. And she has helped His servant Israel and remembered to be merciful. For He has made this promise to our ancestors, to Abraham and his children forever. May you go in peace. God bless.
Thanks for joining us here again today. In closing, one of the things that really resonated that Pastor Greg said was that God wants to work with us. My question is, how is God looking to work through us this Christmas season, where people all around us need the hope and love of Christ more than ever? If we're really obedient and we're watching, I think that God often opens up situations. We just need to be aware of it. So as we leave from this place today, there's a reminder that we have a foyer time right now, a Zoom call. You'll find the link within the feed and at the end within the credits. Please join us for a time of discussion, and we'll be praying for you guys. I hope you have a fantastic week.